Recently, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech before Congress and held meetings with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump in a seeming attempt to hedge his bets for the upcoming election, as well as shore up support from the current administration for the ongoing war in Gaza. The American-Israeli relationship has historically been something of a bipartisan issue. On the Democratic side, many will try to argue that Israel is the only democratic country in the Middle East, and for the sake of protecting democracy, Israel must be supported. On the Republican side, many will try to argue that Israel and the United States share Judeo-Christian values, that the values of the countries of the Bible are rooted in the same core tenets, and that makes Israel something of a natural ally for American conservatives. Overlapping this is the neoconservative, neoliberal establishment's perception of maintaining the American world order, of maintaining American hegemony, and Israel is a key part of that, acting as something of a node out in the Middle East from which to project American influence out into that corner of the world. Of course, the American Jewish community has been a large influence on support for Israel as well, as has been the American Protestant evangelical population. However, an observation of the trends of American politics, culture, demographics, all seem to suggest that this won't be the case for very long, and that the American-Israeli relationship is going to see its end in the near future. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week where we talk about history and politics, so be sure to subscribe, leave us a comment about what you'd like to see next, and stay tuned for more. If you'd like to join the community, we do have a public Discord server linked in the description, along with a community-made subreddit loaded with memes, charts, maps, and more. And of course, if you'd like to help support the channel directly, consider becoming a channel member or donating to us on Patreon. Having dealt with censorship and demonetization in the past, especially when covering more sensitive topics, your support really goes a long way to keeping the channel going. All members do gain access to a separate members-only Discord server where you can speak with me directly. Now, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Now, the backbone of American support for Israel, what we might call American Zionism, is the Protestant evangelical population. They're the largest and most substantial population with these views. If memory serves, approximately 24% of the total US population, and anywhere from 50 to 75% of them hold this perception of, well, we're about to get into a little bit of the theology of this and so far as what they believe and why they believe it. But the general consensus among a large portion of the American evangelicals is that the Jews are God's chosen people. That for the prophecies of the end times to be fulfilled, for Jesus Christ to come again, the Jews must be in possession of the Holy Land. Not only that, that the Jews must drive out all the non-Jews from the Holy Land and make it their own. By and large, Protestant evangelicals are the greatest supporters for Israel in the United States. They make the greatest donations to Israel. In politics, they make the greatest overtures for support and aid to Israel, intervention on behalf of Israel, all of this stuff. Even for that segment of the evangelical population that doesn't so much subscribe to this mindset, there is among them this sense of kinship with the Jews in that, you know, the Bible is composed of two books, the New Testament and the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is basically what the Jews believe, ergo Judeo-Christian values. They feel this sense of relation with the Jewish people, with Israel, which is, it's interesting, but also kind of perplexing that this sentiment is felt here, but not so much for other Christian countries in the same way. Of course, if you look across a lot of American conservative media, you'll hear some of these same talking points espoused, Judeo-Christian values, that Israel and America are both conservative countries, both have a shared opposition to Iran and radical Islam, this sort of thing. Now, why it's important to bring this group up, of course, they are the largest supporters of Israel in the United States, insofar as total number of a certain demographic group anyhow. But they're also collapsing as a demographic group very quickly for two reasons. That is primarily because, well, America's population in general, its native population is falling, and the only reason the population appears to be growing is because of aggressive immigration policies, aggressive in that we are letting in a lot of immigrants. But that native domestic evangelical population, it's not reproducing itself fast enough and it's declining. The second is, of course, rising secularization. Many people are leaving the faith, or becoming secular, or even converting to other faiths. Now, the evangelicals at present are still a substantial chunk of the population. However, that population is going to drop very quickly. Of course, the issue of secularization, that is still a significant factor that's going to be dwindling those numbers, as well as conversion. But when we look at the demographics of the evangelical population, close to 40% of their population is 65 years or older. That means close to half of the evangelical population is going to pass away within the next few decades. If this segment of the population collapses, support for Israel within the United States is going to decline drastically. And of course, there's the counter side to that. The secular population in the United States, we'll say the secular liberal population in the United States, has a specific animus toward Israel. It's not that they don't support Israel, it's that they see Israel as a hostile country. If we look at the perspective of the secular liberal population, their perception of Israel in general is that it's a state that should be opposed, that Israel is an apartheid state, that it is a colonial state that has taken over land that rightfully belongs to the Palestinians. Israel's actions in Gaza are not helping its case whatsoever. Every single day we're hearing of humanitarian crisis, of civilians being brutalized. This is not helping Israel's image on the global stage, and it's going to cause Israel to hemorrhage more and more support as time goes on. And it's not just the liberals who have this opposition to America's relationship with Israel. If we look at the America First faction of the conservative movement, you have a lot of conservatives, of course a lot of non-evangelicals, who will say, why are we supporting Israel? Israel is getting us involved in more foreign conflicts. We're sending money that should be invested here abroad. We're sending it away. We're causing more trouble. We're going to make more enemies. Israel is antagonizing Iran, and now Iran is going to have more incentive to want to launch terror attacks against the United States. Should we be involved in this foreign theater in the first place? Should we be propping up foreign countries who are antagonizing their neighbors and whose enemies will soon become our enemies? This Israel skeptic faction of the conservative movement is growing in prominence, especially among Catholic Americans, and this is substantial because Catholic Americans are, their share of the total US population has been growing over time. Of course, a good deal of this is because of immigration from Latin America, but still, these populations from Latin America, they're very oblivious to Israel. They come to the United States and they're like, why did the Anglos here support Israel so much? What's going on? And of course I want to re-clarify, I'm talking about total share of the population. The Catholic population, much like the Protestant population, has lost a number of its members to secularization. That's something that could increase or decrease with time, but no matter how you slice it, unless the evangelical population picks up significantly, support for Israel just on a religious basis is going to decline. And I will specify again, this isn't exclusively Catholics, this is non-evangelical conservative Christians in general. Whatever angle you're coming at this from, whether it's from the Democratic side where they used to say, or some of the older guards still say, well, you know, Israel's the only democracy in the region. You got to protect democracy all over the world. Well, the younger generation of Democrats is now saying Israel is a oppressive colonial force. They're causing humanitarian crises. They're taking land from the Palestinians. It's not right. You know, that is the future of the party right there. That is the direction it's moving in. And of course, Israel's prime minister, when he had come here, despite Kamala Harris making significant overtures for her desire to want to help Israel and make some kind of compromise, his attitude in what he was saying was coming off very much as, look, I either want it all or I don't want any of it. Either you help me get everything I want or I don't want to work with you. The Democratic Party at present is desperately trying to straddle these two realities of, you know, the old guard that wants to maintain the neoliberal world order and protect democracy all over the world versus, you know, the new generation that has these more radical ideas, that cares more about native populations and minorities, and also doesn't want to be involved in foreign wars all too much. Sure, you know, Ukraine, you might say, is an exception. But insofar as, you know, other foreign wars in the Middle East, you know, they see this as colonial action. They see this as, you know, the oppressive American power exerting its dominance over weaker countries. A chunk of the Democratic Party is already in the camp of not only wanting to have no relationship with Israel, but also opposing Israel. Now, if we look at this from the Republican angle, yes, there's a lot more overt sympathy for Israel over on that side, particularly because evangelical Christians do compose a large chunk of the Republican voter base. If you look at the states which support the Republican Party more than any other state, it's the most evangelical states in the country. Trump, during his first administration, of course, had this whole policy of trying to bring peace to the Middle East. Some would argue that this is because he was just as much of a neocon as others, that he had as much sympathy and support for Israel as others, but some might argue that this was his effort to try to get America out of these forever wars, to try to stabilize that region so we could finally withdraw from it. However you look at it, there's complexity to it, and Trump isn't going to be as overt with it as we'd like him to be. We of course got Trump's opinion of Netanyahu in the past when he called him a traitor, but during his recent meeting with Netanyahu, he had nothing but good things to say about him, it would seem. It's hard to gauge Trump's exact feelings on the matter. It could very well be possible that Trump recognizes he can't win without the evangelical vote and so wants to maintain a good relationship with Israel for the sake of maintaining this voter base. But then you also look at Trump's vice president pick, J.D. Vance, who's very sympathetic to Israel, and it's just sort of hard to say. That being said, with the direction that the general conservative movement is going in, moving away from these foreign interventions and just being skeptical of them in general, whether it's Israel or Ukraine or Taiwan, this is indicative that in the long term, the conservative movement in the United States, along with the fact that the evangelical population is shrinking, is going to become more skeptical of Israel as well, and the relationship is going to decline on that front. The Israelis seem to recognize this as well, as despite multiple countries having condemned their actions against Gaza, they just sort of seem to keep pressing on. Arguably, Netanyahu's even doubling down on his tactics, recognizing that in the long term, he's not going to maintain these Western allies for Israel in the long term, and he may need to pivot to some other country instead. The American-Israeli relationship from the get-go, and at least from the side of Israel, was always something of a fair-weather relationship. The Israelis, during the Cold War, had initially sought alliance with the Soviet Union. That didn't pan out because the Soviets were courting the Arab states as well, so of course Israel winds up with the United States. But if we look at a situation where, frankly, the Israelis can probably see the writing on the wall already. The Democrats are becoming more anti-Israel, the Republicans are becoming more anti-Israel, America as a whole wants to step back from foreign intervention. Well, they might start looking for other partnerships, and they might start caring a lot less what America has to say. Russia probably isn't a very viable ally for the Israelis, given Russia has a strong partnership with Syria. India might be a good counter for Israel. The two already have something of a loose friendship and something of a shared animosity for Islam as well. And they are sort of strategically positioned to where they could sort of encircle their opponents, whether it's Pakistan, Iran, or anything in that general West to Central Asian region. Of course, we're just seeing trickles of this right now. This probably isn't going to manifest immediately, but within a matter of years, it's quite possible we'll see the American-Israeli partnership finally collapse. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.